Somewhere in the frozen north, sitting at the very edge of the world, is a town like no other on Earth. It has streets, it has shops, it has schools and restaurants and people going about their daily lives. But this town has one rule that exists nowhere else on the entire planet. You are not allowed to die here. Not a suggestion, not a guideline, a law. And the reason behind that law is so disturbing, so genuinely terrifying, that once you hear it, you will never forget it. This is Longyearbyen, and this is its unbelievable story. Where exactly is this place? Longyearbyen sits on the archipelago of Svalbard, a remote cluster of islands in the Arctic Ocean, halfway between mainland Norway and the North Pole. To put that in perspective, this town sits at 78 degrees north latitude. The North Pole is at 90 degrees north. Longyearbyen is closer to the North Pole than it is to the Norwegian capital, Oslo. It is one of the most remote, most isolated, most extreme places on Earth where human beings have chosen to build a permanent community. Around 2,500 people call this place home, and every single one of them lives under the same extraordinary rule. If your body starts to fail, if illness takes hold, if old age catches up, if the end feels near, you will be put on a plane, and you will be flown away from this place before you take your final breath. Because in Longyearbyen, the ground itself is dangerous. To understand why this law exists, you need to understand what lies beneath the surface of Longyearbyen. The ground here is what scientists call permafrost, permanently frozen earth, a layer of soil and rock that has been frozen solid without ever thawing for thousands of years. And permafrost does something that ordinary ground does not do. It preserves everything buried inside it, perfectly, indefinitely. In the early days of Longyearbyen, when miners and settlers first arrived here in the early 1900s, the town had a cemetery. Like any town, when residents died, they were buried in the local ground. But the bodies buried in that permafrost did not decompose. They did not break down, return to the earth, and disappear the way a body normally would. They simply froze and stayed exactly as they were, year after year, decade after decade, perfectly preserved beneath the ice. And then, something happened that changed everything. In 1918, the world was gripped by one of the deadliest pandemics in human history, the Spanish flu. A strain of influenza so catastrophic it infected an estimated 500 million people, 1/3 of the entire world's population at the time. It killed between 50 and 100 million people in just 2 years. And when it reached Longyearbyen, it killed several of the town's residents, who were buried like everyone else in the permafrost cemetery. Decades passed. The world moved on. The Spanish flu became history. But in 1998, researchers came to Longyearbyen with a disturbing mission. They wanted to dig up those 1918 graves because they had a theory that in the frozen, perfectly preserved bodies of those flu victims, the actual virus might still exist, still intact, still potentially active. They dug, they found the bodies, preserved almost exactly as they had been buried 80 years earlier. And what they discovered sent shockwaves through the scientific community. The Spanish flu virus, one of the deadliest pathogens in recorded human history, was still present in those frozen remains, preserved by the permafrost, waiting for 80 years. The implications were immediate and terrifying. If the Spanish flu could survive for 80 years in the frozen ground, what else was down there? What other viruses? What other bacteria? What other pathogens from decades and centuries of burials were perfectly preserved beneath the surface of this town? The authorities made a decision. No more burials. Not one more body would be placed in that ground. And from that point forward, an extraordinary rule took hold in Longyearbyen. If you are dying, you must leave. The town's hospital does not have end-of-life care. There is no hospice. There is no provision for the final stages of life here. The moment a resident's condition becomes terminal, arrangements are made, a flight is booked, and the person is transported to mainland Norway to live out their final days. The same applies to being born. Pregnant women in the advanced stages of pregnancy must also leave, traveling to the mainland to give birth before returning to Longyearbyen with their newborn. In this town, the two most fundamental human experiences, birth and death, must happen somewhere else. But the no-death law is not even the strangest thing about Longyearbyen, because this town has another reality that most people simply cannot believe when they first hear it. Polar bears outnumber people here. There are approximately 2,500 humans living in Longyearbyen, and there are an estimated 3,000 polar bears roaming the Svalbard archipelago. Polar bears, the largest land predators on Earth, animals that can weigh up to 800 kilograms, animals that actively hunt, animals that have no natural fear of humans. And there are more of them than there are residents. The result, every single person who leaves the boundaries of the town is required by law to carry a rifle. Not recommended, not suggested, required by law. School children on field trips are accompanied by armed adults. Hikers carry weapons as standard. Scientists working outside the town perimeter carry firearms as a matter of routine. This is daily life in Longyearbyen. And there is one more rule about Longyearbyen that sounds almost impossible in the modern world. There are no homeless people here. Not because everyone is wealthy, not because housing is abundant, but because of a brutal and simple policy. If you lose your job in Longyearbyen, you lose your right to live there. Every resident must be economically self-sufficient. There is no social welfare system, no unemployment support, no safety net of any kind. The moment you are no longer employed, you are expected to leave the town. It sounds harsh, and in many ways it is. But it is the reality of a community built on survival in one of the most extreme environments on Earth. Every person here must contribute. There is simply no other way to maintain a functioning community this far from the rest of the world. Longyearbyen is a place that forces you to confront something deeply uncomfortable. We spend most of our lives assuming that the rules of the world are fixed, that birth and death happen wherever life takes us, that we are free to stay wherever we choose, that the ground beneath us is safe and ordinary. Longyearbyen dismantles every single one of those assumptions. Here, the ground remembers everything buried inside it. The darkness lasts for months. The predators outnumber the people, and the most fundamental moments of human life, being born and dying, must happen somewhere else. It is a place that should not exist, and yet it does. 2,500 people wake up there every single day, carry their rifles, hang their blackout curtains, and live one of the most extraordinary lives on the surface of this earth. And underneath their feet, perfectly preserved in the frozen ground, the past is still waiting, and that is the town where it is illegal to die. If this video made you say, "I cannot believe that place is real," then share it with someone right now, because I promise you, they won't believe you until they watch it themselves. Subscribe to UnrealWorldFacts for more stories about the places, creatures, and secrets on this planet that sound completely impossible, but are absolutely, undeniably real. I'll see you in the next one.